Greetings, true believers, and welcome to this video comparing Avengers Infinity War to its source material in the comics. Since we'll be analyzing the whole movie, there will be significant spoilers in this video, including talk about the ending, so this is your spoiler warning. If you have not seen Avengers Infinity War, stop watching now. Still here? Okay, cool. First, let's look at the title of the movie. While Infinity War isn't a direct adaptation of any one comic, it bears the most similarity to the lead-up and first issue of the Infinity Gauntlet. The comic with the title Infinity War is actually a sequel to the Infinity Gauntlet, in which the Magus, an evil counterpart to Adam Warlock, made his own play for ultimate power. The Infinity War comic is where the Magus creates a bunch of evil doppelgangers of Earth's heroes to keep them busy. So if you've ever read or played Maximum Carnage, this is where that evil six-armed copy of Spider-Man came from. This isn't the first time Marvel Studios has taken a name from one book while primarily using story elements from others. The previous Avengers movie, Age of Ultron, had very little in common with the comic of the same name, other than Ultron being in both. The comic Age of Ultron involves Wolverine going back in time to kill Hank Pym before he can create Ultron like some kind of reverse Terminator. If you remember, Infinity War the movie was originally announced as Infinity War Part 1. I assume the change was made to prevent people from anticipating the cliffhanger ending, and since this movie was most noticeably influenced by the very beginning of the Infinity Gauntlet, my guess is that the continuation next year will be called Avengers Infinity Gauntlet. Many characters who appeared in the Infinity Gauntlet comic are not present here, and vice versa. Some of this is because the timeline of the movies is very different from the timeline of the comics. Things like the current Guardians of the Galaxy team, Civil War, and Winter Soldier all happened years after the Infinity Gauntlet comic. Since the X-Men are obviously absent from the cinematic universe, the Guardians of the Galaxy are a welcome addition. The movie begins pretty much as a direct continuation of Thor Ragnarok as Thanos and his men attack the Asgardian refugee ship. Here we see the Black Order, a group of Thanos' followers who first appeared in the 2013 event simply titled Infinity. While not specifically named in the movie, they are Corvus Glaive, the Ebony Maw, Proxima Midnight, and the Black Dwarf. Supergiant doesn't appear in the movie, but we have enough characters as it is. They all first appeared around the same time as the Outriders, the genetically engineered four-armed soldiers that were used by Proxima Midnight and the Black Dwarf in this movie during the Battle of Wakanda. Going into this film, I expected Loki to fill the role of Mephisto from the Infinity Gauntlet comic, bowing to Thanos to stay alive while waiting for his opportunity to seize power. However, it seems Loki's character development from the last couple Thor movies have paid off when he tries to stab Thanos in the throat instead of just stabbing his brother in the ribs all the time. We also get an idea of Thanos' raw physical strength when he easily beats the Hulk in a fight. In the comics, they're actually pretty similar strength-wise, although Thanos at one point specifically mentions that he had been avoiding fighting the Hulk. The Hulk, of course, gets sent off to Earth where he crashes into the Sanctum Sanctorum in a moment mirroring this one from the Infinity Gauntlet comic, with Banner in place of the Silver Surfer. We also see Thanos crack the Tesseract open to obtain the Space Stone. This is one of several examples of the cinematic universe taking objects from the comics and making them Infinity Stones for the sake of simplicity. In the comics, the Tesseract is known as the Cosmic Cube, and isn't an Infinity Gem, but possesses power similar to the Reality Gem, not the Space Gem. Another example of this is the Eye of Agamotto, in the comics a magical artifact in the possession of Doctor Strange, which can see the truth, among other things, while in the movie it contains the Time Stone. Finally, the gem in Vision's forehead in the comics is a solar jewel used as a power source, whereas in the movie it's the Mind Stone. Adam Warlock has been known to wear the Soul Gem in his forehead in a similar fashion, but he does not appear in this movie despite playing a prominent role in the comic and being teased in the post-credits of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I wouldn't be surprised if he shows up in the next one, honestly. Speaking of the Vision, we finally see him and Scarlet Witch together, much like they were in the comics, even going so far as getting married. We see Iron Man's new nanotech suit in this movie, which is very reminiscent of his Bleeding Edge suit from the comics. Developed by Tony Stark and Mr. Fantastic, the Bleeding Edge armor could liquefy so Tony could store it inside his own body. We also see Spider-Man in his Iron Spider costume, last seen at the end of Spider-Man Homecoming. In the comics, he wore this during the Civil War while he was working under Tony Stark, so it makes sense here. It looked a little different than the comics, being all red and gold to match Iron Man, but both the movie and comic versions of the suit have the mechanical spider legs which pop out of the back of the suit. The mask with the glowing eyes is a little more reminiscent of the more recent spider armor built by Peter himself. Captain America and the Black Widow appear with new looks, Steve Rogers, having gone on the run from the government and given up the identity of Captain America, appears in a black version of his costume. This has happened several times in the comics, first as Nomad wearing the deepest V-neck ever worn on a man, and later as the Captain with a black costume that was later worn by US Agent. This is also when Cap sports a similar beard to the one seen in the movie. Natasha Romanoff appears now as a blonde, which happened in the comics when she impersonated Yelena Belova, another Black Widow, in order to infiltrate Norman Osborn's Thunderbolts for Nick Fury. We see Thanos use the Reality Stone against Drax and Mantis in a similar way to the demonstration of his power against Nebula and Star Fox in the comic. In the comic, he also turns Thor into glass and Nova into Legos before smashing them, but it seems in the movie the effects of the Reality Stone are temporary since Drax and Mantis recover after Thanos leaves. We learn more of Thanos' cinematic origin and backstory, which is a little different from his comic book counterpart. In both, his goal is to kill half the people in the universe, but in the comic, it's because he's in love with death, the literal physical embodiment of death, and is trying to win her favor by balancing the universe. In the movie, however, it's because his own home planet of Titan was devastated due to overpopulation and lack of resources, and he has decided to force his solution of randomly killing half the population in order for the remaining half to flourish on the rest of the universe. Speaking of Titan, here it's portrayed as a distant planet, while in the comics it's actually the moon orbiting Saturn, meaning that Thanos is initially from our own solar system. Death herself does not appear in this movie, however for a moment I thought the cloaked figure guarding the Soul Stone on Vormir was going to be her, and I'm sure that was an intentional homage. Speaking of Vormir, while it's pretty obscure, the planet does exist in the comics as the home planet of Starstalker, who appears in Avengers number 124. This issue also featured the origin of Mantis, and the following issue had Thanos as a villain, so maybe that has something to do with why such an obscure planet was chosen for the movie. Thor goes with Rocket and Groot to Nidavellir to forge a new hammer for himself. On the way there, we learn that Thor can understand Groot, joking that it was an elective in school. In the comics, Asgardians speak a language known as the All-Tongue, which sounds like the native language to anybody who hears it. This essentially means that Asgardians can speak and, I assume, understand any language. The trio reach Nidavellir, where the Dwarf King Atri forged Mjolnir in the heart of a dying star, just as he did in the books. Atri forges Stormbreaker, I assume out of Uru, the same metal that Mjolnir was made out of. In the comics, Stormbreaker was made for Beta Ray Bill, an alien who was deemed worthy to lift Mjolnir and thus gain the powers of Thor. While Bill and Thor fought over possession of Mjolnir, Odin was so impressed by Beta Ray Bill that he tasked Atri with forging a new hammer for him with the same enchantments, hence Stormbreaker. Finally, we get to the big finale, the snap. Yes, much like in the Infinity Gauntlet comic, Thanos succeeds in gathering the Infinity Gems and snaps his fingers, killing half the people in the universe. In the comic, Thanos has the gauntlet for a little bit, faffing about in space before doing it, making me think that the comic book version of the character was a little more reluctant to go through with it, or maybe getting an axe in the chest just forced the movie Thanos to move up his timetable. In the comic, Thanos' mass genocide using the Infinity Gauntlet is what spurs Earth's mightiest heroes to gather and go off into space after him, which I suspect will happen in Avengers 4 next year. A lot of heroes die in the event. some of which I didn't expect in the movie, including Black Panther, Doctor Strange, and Spider-Man. While I'm sure this damage will be undone by the end of the next movie, it's surprising that some of these characters won't be among the ones to go after Thanos. Although all of the original Avengers are still alive, with the possible exception of Hawkeye, who doesn't appear in this movie. Hopefully if he's alive, we'll see him next year. While Spider-Man didn't survive Thanos' genocide in the movie, in the comic he was on Earth when it happened, causing his spider sense to flip out. Black Panther also disappears, just like in the comic, so I wonder if the next part will have Shuri fill in for him as she has done in the comics before. The final shot of the movie reminds me of the final pages of the Infinity Gauntlet comic, in which Thanos retires to a quiet life, which of course doesn't last. In the comic, this was after Thanos was defeated and his damage undone, while in the movie this is after Thanos wins. Of course, as always, we have a post-credit sequence, this one showing Maria Hill and Nick Fury witnessing the consequences of Thanos' genocide before succumbing to it themselves. However, before disappearing, Fury places a call to Captain Marvel, who will star in her own movie before the next Avengers. Her movie will be a prequel taking place sometime in the 90s, probably explaining why Fury already knows her, and it's safe to assume that she'll show up in Avengers 4. And that's pretty much the movie. So now I'm going to indulge in random minutia that interests me and no one else, or what I like to call gems versus stones. The Infinity Stones in the comics were initially called the Soul Gems, before their true nature was discovered by Thanos, who named them the Infinity Gems. Unlike their cinematic counterparts, the gems were round and smooth, and their colors were different as well. Traditionally, the Space Gem was purple, the Mind Gem was blue, the Soul Gem was green, the Reality Gem was yellow, the Time Gem was orange, and the Power Gem was red. There have been times when they were depicted as different colors, but that was probably a coloring error, since they shift colors in the same book and they're shown as their correct colors later on. During the time when the multiverse was knocked off balance and alternate Earths were crashing into each other in a cascading effect that would eventually destroy all of reality, the Illuminati, a secret cadre of Earth's mightiest heroes, assembled the Infinity Gauntlet to prevent one such incursion. Wielding the Infinity Gauntlet, Captain America was able to save the planet, but in the process, the gems shattered, except for the Time Gem, which simply disappeared and emerged again later. However, while that particular incursion was prevented, the multiverse still eventually collapsed, saved only by Dr. Doom, who stole the power of the Beyonders and used it to save scraps of alternate Earths, forging a new patchwork world in which he was the God Emperor. Thanks to the Fantastic Four and Molecule Man, Doom was overthrown and the universes restored, but, as we learned from the movies, the Infinity Stones were created at the dawn of the universe, and so, when the universe was reborn, so too were the gems. Now matching the colors of those from the cinematic universe, and also referred to as Infinity Stones rather than gems, the new stones no longer had the smooth surface they once did, with the exception of the Soul Stone. Interestingly, the Soul Stone is now the same color as the Time Gem was, the only gem which did not shatter. So that's some extra trivia for you. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe for more. And if there's anything I touched on that you want to learn more about, let me know in the comments below, as well as your thoughts on Avengers Infinity War. The issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below, along with links to my Patreon and Twitter. So, until next time, true believers, Excelsior!